The chamber pulsed with a cold, mechanical heartbeat, light rippling across metallic walls like a tide of knives. He sat chained in the center, unshaven, bruised, his NASA hoodie ragged at the edges, lips split and bleeding. Yet when he lifted his head, there was no fear in his eyes, only a grin that unsettled his captors. "You think these chains hold me?" His voice cracked with exhaustion, yet it carried the sharpness of flint. "You should have done more homework. Ever heard of Florida Man?" The soldiers froze. Their armor clinked as they turned to one another, their slit-pupiled eyes narrowing in unease. Words clicked and hissed in their throat languages, fragments of doubt bleeding through discipline. High Seeker Verowan, tall as two men, scales glistening like obsidian glass, stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the trembling human. "You speak nonsense," Verowan said, voice a cold chime of authority. "Your defiance is meaningless. We will break you. You are the first, and your kind will follow." Jace Ryder leaned back as far as the chains would allow, smirk deepening, blood staining his teeth. "Buddy, if you think this is me broken, you've never been to an American DMV." That was his shield, humor, as dry and cutting as the desert plains he once called home. But behind the sarcasm, there was a coil of grief wound tight in his chest, a weight no joke could dissolve. He had been running from it for years, and somehow, being chained aboard an alien dreadnought was less suffocating than remembering his sister's empty room. The memory dragged him down a corridor of thought, back to cracked sidewalks and rusted mailboxes, the little town where everyone knew his name, but few dared speak it without judgment. Jace Ryder, 37, a man shaped like the land he grew up on, weathered, stubborn, unyielding. Trouble clung to him like burrs on denim. At the diner, whispers followed him as faithfully as the smell of coffee and fried eggs. That Ryder boy's cursed, always coming back bruised, always picking fights, and he never corrected them. Better to be cursed than pitted. Kara saw through it, though she pretended not to. She worked at the town's only garage, grease streaking her cheek more often than makeup. Practical, guarded, she kept her distance, though sometimes, when dusk stretched long shadows over the gas pumps, she caught herself watching him with something dangerously close to concern. Jace felt it. He pretended he didn't. Survival was easier without attachments. But when the skies cracked open and ships blotted out the stars, her gaze had been the last thing grounding him to earth. The day began with static, a low hum that rattled windows. Farmers leaned against tractors, eyes narrowed toward the sky. Then came the shriek, a silver wound tearing across the heavens, ships falling in formation. The diner emptied. Children screamed. And when the first blast turned the water tower into a blossom of steel and flame, the town scattered in terror. Jace didn't run. He never had. The soldiers that descended were tall, angular, glistening like obsidian blades. They marched in silence, efficient as wolves. Their weapons hissed, spitting beams that burned asphalt into glass. Jace grabbed what he knew, fireworks from the back of his truck, a kitchen knife from his belt, a roll of duct tape he'd carried for years. Improvised, always improvised. Humanity's oldest trick. In an alley behind the garage, one of them cornered Kara, its weapon raised, blade arm gleaming. Jace appeared out of smoke, tossing a bottle rocket taped to a wrench. It exploded with a deafening crack, sparks blinding the hunter. He lunged, driving the kitchen knife into the alien's chest, twisting until its body collapsed with a hiss. Kara's eyes widened, not in gratitude, but in shock at the violence he carried so naturally. "You're insane," she whispered. "Yeah," Jace said, yanking the blade free. "But I'm our kind of insane." Together, they fled through shattered streets, dodging beams of light, the night strobing with destruction. Jace moved like he had rehearsed chaos all his life, shoving Kara behind overturned cars, throwing debris to draw fire, even hurling a stray cat at one of the hunters. The creature screeched in unholy terror, thrashing as claws sank into its scaled face. Kara gaped. Jace shrugged mid-sprint. "We don't understand them either. For a heartbeat, Amid ruin, Kara laughed. It felt wrong, but necessary. The kind of laughter humans had always used to survive storms, wars, heartbreaks. It was resilience in sound. But resilience has its limits. The hunters regrouped, their leader, Veruin himself, descending on the town square like a figure of nightmare. His gaze locked on Jace, studying him not as prey, but as anomaly. Jace shoved Kara into a half-collapsed door. Stay down. Don't move. The fight was quick, brutal. Jace's fireworks ran dry. His blade chipped against alien armor. Still he fought, every breath a refusal to kneel. He struck with fists, with teeth, with raw defiance. But numbers overwhelmed him. Chains snapped around his wrists, cold and final. The townsfolk watched from windows, paralyzed. Jace snarled as they dragged him toward the ship. Kara, pounding her fists against the walls of her hiding place, helpless as his silhouette shrank against the blinding lights. Veruin raised his voice over the crowd. This one will be studied. Alive. Your world will know fear by his example. The ship swallowed him. Engines howled, kicking dust into the night. Kara stumbled into the street, eyes stinging, fists trembling. Around her, neighbors whispered, gossip transmuted into dread. They wanted him alive. What? High above, through reinforced windows, Jace caught her figure one last time. He pressed his forehead to the glass. No words, only a promise in the look. This isn't the end. And then he was gone, consumed by the void, earth shrinking beneath him. The town stood in silence. Somewhere a dog howled. Kara clenched her jaw, the first seed of resistance rooting inside her. They had taken him because he was dangerous. But danger could be taught. Danger could be shared. Now, stranger, pause and listen. Life will chain you, mock you, strip you of dignity, yet still demand you rise. Remember this, greatness is not in perfection, but in defiance. Even when bound in iron, a human heart remains unbroken. And that is what the universe fears most. The cell was alive with light, a lattice of shimmering bars humming in alien frequencies. Jace Ryder sat within, wrists bound in shackles that pulsed with blue current. He stared at the wall, as if it were an old friend he meant to outlast. The soldiers outside shifted uneasily. They had seen prisoners weep, claw, beg for mercy. This one cracked jokes and whistled off-key. When Veruin arrived, the air shifted. The High Seeker's scaled frame filled the corridor, his black eyes sharp as obsidian glass. You will tell us, Veruin declared, his words carved with authority. What makes your kind unpredictable? Jace raised his head slowly, lips curling. Unpredictable? Buddy, you should have been at my uncle's barbecue. A raccoon set the shed on fire. We still don't know how. The soldiers stiffened. Humor was not in their manuals. Resistance was supposed to fracture beneath fear. Yet here, it expanded like wildfire. Veruin's expression did not change, but inside his chest a coil of unease tightened. This man was not following the pattern. They moved him to the tribunal chamber. Walls curved into a dome of steel, every panel alive with shifting glyphs. At its center, a dais where prisoners were made to kneel under the gaze of the hunters. Jay stood, chains dragging, shoulders unbowed. They showed him illusions, earth reduced to ash, oceans boiling, the faces of his dead projected in smoke. His sister's laugh, distorted, turned into a scream. He swallowed hard, knuckles white around his chains. For a moment, grief threatened to break through. Then he chuckled, low and raw. You know what's worse than this? His eyes burned, voice rasping with defiance. Watching reality TV. You can't hurt me worse than that. The tribunal murmured in confusion. Veruin slammed his staff against the ground. Mockery will not shield you. Mockery, Jace said, leaning forward, isn't the shield. It's the blade. Far below, in the town scarred by invasion, Kara Lex was becoming something she never thought she'd be, a leader. At first, grief had hollowed her. The sight of Jace chained and dragged into the sky haunted her sleep. But whispers in the diner began to twist, carrying not just fear, but something sharper. If he was worth capturing alive, then perhaps humanity was worth more than survival. Perhaps they could fight. Kara stood in the garage where she once fixed trucks, now lit by lanterns and filled with townsfolk clutching rifles, pipe wrenches, anything with weight. She spoke with a mechanic's precision, blunt, practical. We can't sit here waiting for mercy. If Ryder's still alive, he's fighting. We fight with him. An old farmer spat tobacco juice into a tin and nodded. Then let's give him hell. The town transformed. Tools became weapons, tractors armored with steel plating. Every gossip, every doubter now carried fire in their eyes. And Kara, who once hid behind grease-stained hands, carried it too. Back on the dreadnought, Jace watched his captors grow restless. Their control was perfect, their science flawless. Yet their subject refused to break. They underestimated the power of small defiance. A smile when beaten, a quip when silenced, laughter in the face of horror. What they did not know was that humor was not his shield at all. It was his tether. Every sarcastic word was a thread tying him back to Earth, to Kara, to the memory of people who needed him. When the guards dragged him through the corridors, he shuffled awkwardly, chains scraping. Beneath his sleeve, hidden against his boot for days, was a strip of duct tape. They hadn't recognized it for what it was. To them, it was meaningless debris. To Jace, it was salvation, humanity's miracle fabric. He waited for the moment, transport between cells, 2 guards, 1 inattentive. He feigned exhaustion, slumping, mumbling nonsense about microwave burritos. When a guard leaned in to sneer, Jace struck. He slapped the duct tape across the alien's weapon, yanked it sideways, and slammed the guard into the wall. The second lunged, only to be caught in the chain Jace whipped like a lasso. The creature thrashed, hissing, before falling silent in a heap. For the first time, silence filled the corridor. Jace breathed hard, sweat stinging his eyes. He tore free of the restraints, scavenged a blade from the fallen guard, and whispered to no one, "Told you. Duct tape solves everything." What followed was chaos. The dreadnought's corridors were not designed for improvisation. Jace turned them into traps, wires stripped, panels torn, sparks raining. He led guards in a crossfire, shoved explosives into vents, wielded alien rifles with clumsy but deadly accuracy. Each move was sloppy, brutal, effective. Precision crumbled before unpredictability. Veruin pursued him personally, fury eclipsing logic. He found his soldiers strung in chains, their bodies twisted in fear. He felt something alien crawl into his chest, doubt. Was this man not prey, but predator? They met at last in the control chamber, lights spilling from a star map above. Veruin towered, staff raised, scales glittering. "Enough," he hissed. "What are you?" Jace stood barefoot on blood-stained steel, breathing hard, face lit by fire from shattered consoles. His voice dropped, calm and final. "Just human. And that's enough." Veruin lunged. Jace caught the staff mid-swing, twisted, slammed it into the floor. They grappled in a storm of fists and claws, chains rattling, sparks flying. The alien's strength was greater, but Jace fought like a cornered wolf, with desperation honed in a craft. He hooked the chain around Veruin's throat, dragged him backward, and bound him to his own throne. The chamber trembled as systems failed, alarms wailing. Veruin thrashed, snarling. "Kill me, then. Finish it." Jace stared, chest heaving, and shook his head. "No. Living with this, living with losing to the thing you called weak, that's worse." He left Veruin chained, a mirror of his own capture. Then he turned, limping through smoke, eyes fixed on the hangar bay. Behind him, the dreadnought burned. Ahead, Earth's horizon beckoned. On the ground below, townsfolk gathered in the night. They watched the ship stagger across the sky like a wounded beast, flames trailing behind it. Kara stood at the front, rifle clutched in trembling hands. She whispered into the wind, "Come back, Ryder. Don't you dare die now." The ship descended in fire, breaking apart in a scream of steel. Debris scattered across the hills, shockwaves rattling windows. Then silence. The people waited, breath held, hearts clenched. Out of the smoke, a figure emerged, limping, covered in blood and ash, alien chains draped across his shoulders like trophies. Jace Ryder walked back into the world, eyes searching the crowd until they locked on Kara. For the first time, he let his grin fade, and in its place came something truer, weary relief. The crowd did not whisper now. They did not gossip. They parted around him in reverent silence. Kara stepped forward, pressing a foil-wrapped burrito into his hand. His laugh was cracked but alive. God, I miss this. And now, stranger, consider the lesson written in his scars. Cages will surround you. Illusions will torment you. Powers greater than yourself will demand you break. But strength is not the absence of fear or pain. It is the choice to stand, to laugh, to fight anyway. Remember this. The universe may tremble at weapons and empires, but it is the unbroken will of a single human that will outlast them all. The wreckage smoldered in the hills for days, smoke rising like black prayers into the dawn. The dreadnought's carcass lay torn across the horizon, ribs of steel jutting through the earth, its once perfect geometry reduced to ruin. Townsfolk gathered at a distance, staring with a mix of awe and dread, whispering about what the fire might mean. For some, it was victory. For others, it was the beginning of something far worse. For Kara Lex, it was both and more. She stood apart from the others, arms folded across her chest, scanning the haze with unblinking eyes. Part of her expected only ash to remain. Part of her refused to let go of the hope that Jace Ryder had survived. When the smoke thinned enough to reveal a figure, silence fell across the crowd. A man emerged, limping, coated in soot and blood, carrying alien chains across his shoulders like relics of some ancient war. The weight bent him, but did not break him. His face was hollowed by exhaustion, yet alive, and when his eyes found Kara's, a wordless recognition passed between them. He had returned, not untouched, not triumphant in the old sense, but undeniably human. The people stepped back to let him through. For once, there were no mutters of suspicion or curses whispered under breath. They had seen him dragged into the sky in shackles, and now saw him walking free with those same shackles hanging like trophies. Whatever doubts lingered about Jace Ryder, they died in that silence. Kara approached him slowly, every step deliberate, until she stood before him. Without speaking, she pressed a burrito wrapped in foil into his hand. He let out a broken laugh, shaking his head. God, I miss this. That moment should have been peace, but it wasn't. The dreadnought's final transmissions still echoed in alien space, carried on frequencies faster than light. Warnings had been sent. Veruin's voice, distorted but unbroken, had told the Empire, "We captured him alive, and we were found dead in chains." Those words, meant as an explanation, instead became a curse. For the first time, the mighty hunters admitted fear, and fear spreads faster than conquest. Jace knew it, even as he chewed Kara's burrito with shaky hands. He could feel the eyes of the townsfolk on him, not just with gratitude, but with expectation. He had never asked to be a symbol, never asked to stand for anyone but himself. Yet here he was, their anchor, their proof that humanity could bleed and still rise. Kara watched him quietly, reading the unease beneath his grin. She did not speak comfort. She simply sat beside him on the diner steps, her presence saying what words could not, that he wasn't alone anymore. Night came, and with it, strange calm. Children slept despite the glow on the horizon. Mothers held them tighter. Old men stood with rifles across their laps. The town that once whispered about curses now whispered about chains and freedom. Jace lay awake in Kara's garage, staring at the ceiling as machines ticked softly around him. His body ached with every breath, but his mind would not rest. He remembered Veruin's eyes when the chain tightened around his throat. Shock, then fear, then something like reverence. What unsettled Jace most was not that he had survived, but that the alien leader had looked at him like a prophecy. The following morning, scouts returned from the hills with fragments of alien steel. Children carried scraps home as trinkets, while Kara studied circuitry with the focus of a surgeon. "We need to understand it," she said, hands black with grease. "If they come back, and they will, we can't just fight with fireworks and duct tape." Jace leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, smirking. Careful, Lex. That's how it starts. One minute you're reverse engineering starships. Next minute you're the villain in every sci-fi movie. Her eyes flicked to him, sharp, unamused. Maybe that's what it takes. Jace said nothing more, but the words lingered. Humanity had always survived by stealing fire from the gods. Maybe this time would be no different. Days passed. The town rebuilt slowly, wounds bandaged, roofs patched. Yet above every repair hung a shadow. The knowledge that the hunters would return. They had not been defeated, only humiliated. And humiliation is a wound empires cannot bear. Jace carried that knowledge in silence, wearing his smirk like armor, though Kara saw the cracks beneath it. In the quiet moments, she caught him staring at the hills, jaw clenched, eyes distant. She knew he was preparing himself for the inevitable, even if he pretended otherwise. The climax came not with fire from the sky, but with silence on the ground. One evening, as the sun bled orange across the horizon, a soundless ripple passed over the town. Lights flickered, animals cried out, and every radio blared static. Jay stood in the street, fists tightening around the chain he still carried. The dreadnought was gone, but its shadow had returned. From the static, a voice emerged, Veruin's alive, vengeful and cold. You thought chains were victory. You thought survival was triumph. We are coming, human, not for conquest, for fear. Your kind will be made into warning. The townsfolk froze, panic choking them. Kara's hand found Jace's, gripping tight. He squeezed back, steady as stone. Then he turned to the people, his voice rough but unshaken. They're wrong. We don't survive to be warnings. We survive to live. And living. He lifted the chain, metal clinking in the fading light. Living means fighting back, every damn time. The crowd erupted, not with fear, but with resolve. Farmers, mechanics, teachers, children barely old enough to lift tools. They all shouted back, voices rough but united. Kara felt it surge through her bones. This wasn't a town anymore. It was a defiance, alive and dangerous.